Sorry.
No, you want to start again? Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another session of PR News Live on LinkedIn, and thank you for joining us. Before welcoming our guest, I'd like to invite you, the audience, to send questions or comments during the live session. We'd like to include them in our program. Now to our special guest, Alex Slater. Alex is founding partner of the Clyde Group in Washington, D.C., which he founded in 2014 after spending time in several of Washington, D.C. PR firms, such as the Glover Park Group and SKD Knickerbocker, two great names. During his tenure at the Clyde Group, he's conceived and executed some really good public affairs campaigns for the entertainment software industry and major studios, as well as companies like Ford and American Airlines. He's also developed a track record in progressive politics, and his writing has appeared in The Guardian, in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, and I'm very happy to say, in PRNEWS.
So, oh my goodness, of course.
Great to have you with us.
Hey, thanks, Seth. Great to be here. Always appreciate collaborating with you. Gosh, it's been going on, 10 years, something like that?
Yeah, it's been a long time. We were both teenagers when we started. So
teenagers, yeah, absolutely. That's the age I have, of course.
Okay, so Alex, where are you coming? Where are you talking to us from?
Seth, I'm glad you asked. I almost want to flip the computer around because I'm talking to you from my native Scotland, and I'm actually beachside. The ocean here, the North Sea. So that is what I can see if I move my eyes up. Beautiful day. I saw a really funny t-shirt the other day that was like, "I love Scottish summertime. It's my favorite day of the year." So I'm savoring it over here.
Know it well. I did a year in Manchester, England, so I know.
There you go.
I know what you're talking about.
Right.
Anyway. So welcome. Thank you for joining us all the way from Scotland. I don't think we've ever had a guest from Scotland.
Honored.
This is wonderful.
Yeah, if it goes well, I'll flip the computer around.
Okay. So, Alex, let's begin with the article that you wrote in PR News. It was it was almost a year ago. And I'm going to put it up on the screen here. Here it is. You wrote it back on May the 27th of 2020. And the title of it, as you can see there, is "The Pandemic Will Hasten Changes in PR and PR Agencies." And you wrote at the end of it, a quote here, "A new age of PR is coming. In a post-COVID-19 world, firms will be held to a higher standard. It won't be enough to do the job. The PR industry will join the rest of corporate America in a new era of ethical business practices, philanthropy, pro bono work, and above and beyond community engagement. In the wake of coronavirus, the public will expect nothing less." So my question, Alex, is, are PR and corporate America doing business more ethically, doing more pro bono work, and engaging in community activities at a greater rate, as you predicted a year ago? Or are people who did all that still doing it, and maybe with just a few more companies joining in? So what's the state of play as you see it now?
Well, look, interesting question. The most interesting thing about that article was that it was written just before the murder of George Floyd. So yes, companies are engaged more in the community in a way that we could, at that point, never imagine. So in a way that accelerated. So the article was somewhat prescient. And I think, yes, the answer is, on the whole, both corporate America and the communications industry are moving in the right direction. I think it's fashionable to bash corporate America for not moving fast enough, but I think there are really encouraging signs. That said, there's a way to go. Though it's, I'd measure it in terms of commitment, an understanding of the task of DE&I that's ahead of us, and the urgency. Yeah, I think we're entering what I call an accountability zone. It's been an interesting year in terms of commitments, progress, but now if there's not imminent achievement of commitments, for example, in workforce representation, or a credible roadmap to get there, then I think companies will face the penalties. You know, comms is a real sea change. If corporate America is seeing a change, then the industry of communications and public relations is seeing double that. Um, let's start with internal comms, right?
Yeah.
Talking to employees, talking with employees was an afterthought, um, I would say, before the murder of George Floyd. And now, in order to create credible environments that value diversity and inclusion, yes, but equity critically, we have to be not just communicating with, but talking with and having a conversation with our internal audiences and external stakeholders of the companies that we advise. We're going from also a place where, multicultural communications, as they used to be called
Right.
in the comms industry, was a small part of a larger communications plan for a company, for a major organization, for a CEO. That's no longer the case, of course, and it shouldn't be the case within the function of an agency. It should be integrated into everything that we do, and there's a strong commercial case for that too.
Agree. So, it's nice to talk about companies doing more. It's nice to talk about companies taking stands and CEOs taking stands and speaking out on social and political issues, which is a bit of a change from, let's say, even 5 to 10 years ago, where the standard advice was stay out of politics, do your job, stay in your lane, do your business. Obviously, today it's different. Still, companies have to sell to people who don't agree with their social agenda. So I'm always looking at, sort of peeling back the onion. For example, last month there was a poll in Fortune where they polled the Fortune 500 CEOs, and they asked them, should CEOs speak out on issues, or have they spoken enough and they should start to be quiet on things? They split 50-50, right down the middle, which a lot of people, myself included, found fascinating. Then there was a poll from Weber Shandwick's United Minds consultancy. Again, it kind of blew me away. Although when I thought about it more, I understood it. It found that 40% of the C-suite thinks diversity is, quote, a waste of time and resources. And 34% of staffers agreed with the CEO on this. So I guess my question is, how do you see all that? And whether speaking out on social issues is the same as or included in, what you consider to be DEI. That's a lot to unpack there. I'm sorry.
There's a lot to unpack, and I'm glad it's sort of peeling the onion, as you rightly say.
Yeah.
We should. The last question is actually the most important strategic question that I would come in with, which is, right, let's break away your practices of diversity, equity, and inclusion from your desire or strategy to speak out on social issues. It is tempting to conflate both because often they relate to racially charged issues or issues related to underrepresented populations. That's kind of patronizing and sort of misses the point. Yes, there's an intersection but keep them apart. So, and then you ask my favorite question related to is diversity, equity, and inclusion worth it? Meaning, and this one, you're right, blew me away. That 40% of the C-suite in the Fortune 500, by the way, this wasn't a random poll, that 50% of the C-suite thinks it's a waste of time and resources. That blows me away, because the commercial case for investment in, let's just diversity is pretty impregnable. Saying it's a waste of resources, is factually incorrect. There is literally a payoff. It's not just the right thing to do. Let's set that aside. But it is the commercially more profitable thing to do. I think, Seth, it was in your piece this week, which is great. You also cited a McKinsey piece. Maybe you sent it to me. That cites that the top quartile of companies that invest in or are diverse perform 19% better. So, look, I'm not a CEO, but from the outside, it seems like business cases is for more engaged, more profitable, for retention of talent, for being leads in industries. And this is even before George Floyd, right? And the acceleration must have taken place. All right. So if CEOs don't understand all of the positive commercial case, then there's the unquestionable perception of risk now, or real risk that's accelerating. In the context of ESG, companies are finding it harder to raise money if their practices are not moving in the direction of diversity, at least. Supply chains are going to become affected. There's ethical questions there. So look, there's opportunity and there's risk. So for that part, you CEOs have, you have your party, but the perceptual and reality, and the perceptual risk and the reality is not in your favor. Social issues, by the way, a little more hazy. It doesn't surprise me. It's 50-50. It sort of represents the country. And I'll be interested to see if that number of those who think that CEOs should speak out, or the company should speak out, it's been rising. I'll be interested to see if it does. I will tell you from advising clients on this, we're at the tripwire for a lot of companies that are struggling with this.
Yeah. The thing about the poll where people said diversity is a waste of time, it surprised me. And then I thought, wait a minute, that means 60% of the C-suite thinks it's not a waste of time. And the more I thought about that, I said, okay, well, fair enough. I think that's fair.
Fair. Yeah, that's true.
That about 35% of employees agreed. Okay, that means about 70 or 65% of employees believe that diversity is important. So, okay, that kind of made sense the more I thought about it. But looking at it initially, it was a little scary.
Sure. Can I make a point?
Out of touch, basically.
Yeah. And can I make a point about the 34%? I think it's easy to demonize them. To demonize them, even talking about to demonize, parts of an employee base that might feel left behind or unfocused on. It's ironically those who have traditionally not been left behind. I'll name it. Often white males who feel that companies have overcorrected, or in doing so are just not listening to their often very serious concerns. So I am sympathetic to that perception, even if it doesn't exactly match that 34% that you were talking about.
Right. So let's have a little fun here. It is Pride Month. And so we asked you in advance to tell us, to name your LGBTQ plus hero. And I'd like you to share it with us.
I'm glad you asked. As a gay man, this one is particularly important to me. So it's Pete Buttigieg, but if you think about it, Pete was by no means a specifically a gay crusader, which I sort of think is the point. I think by the progress, see, I look, I'm biased. I was on or around the campaign all the time. I was lucky enough to travel around the country with him. Um, but I think it's important because the fact that he was gay was not perceived as important, at least in the Democratic Party. That's a huge leap forward. And it's also a huge leap forward because of the way that people reacted to his candidacy. He had a incredibly credible policy platform, and he was respected and competed on that. And remember, his opponents were people who had, including Joe Biden, people who had openly opposed gay rights in the not too distant past. Joe Biden had voted against the Defense of Marriage Act in 1996. And his sexual orientation didn't come up at all. I don't want to pretend that we don't have the whole fight ahead of us. They're encouraging signs of progress, like Rachel Levine, a trans woman who's now the Undersecretary of Health. I also don't want to minimize in choosing Pete the much greater sacrifices, what I call the greatest generation of those who fought and died of AIDS, particularly in the 80s, but 90s too.
Sure. When speaking of Pride Month, when companies come to you and seek advice on inclusion or a Pride campaign, let's say, are there questions that you ask them before you advise them? In other words, do you want to look at what they've done, what they're doing, what kind of company they are before you advise them? And once you get there, what sorts of things do you commonly find with companies?
Yeah, great question. The answer to the last one is yes. No, I'm just joking. So, in terms of assessing the environment and the potential structure of a company, I'd return to, the sophistication of the leadership, or at least the dedication of the leadership, or are they seeing it as a business case, a moral imperative, both? Are they same under the same frame? Are they seeing this as risk mitigation or opportunity? It helps to know that way whether you could truly work with them. In our case, very personal decision at Clyde Group. If they're not, or we assess they're not, I don't think we can engage to be successful, let alone peg them on for reasons that we want to. So, but we want to help companies, we want to help organizations as much as we can, no matter where in the journey they are, if they're doing the right thing. Here's the key question, I think, in order to assess that is, well, I think you have to be humble about being a communicator. You can tell if companies are dedicated to this if they're bringing in a group of people who are empowered. So the general counsel, HR, of course, critically, commercial operations deep in the company, that signifies a real commitment to change in this area. So how wide is that commitment, so that it is not just communications? Because if it's just us, respectfully, we can't even do our job, nor is it the right agent for change. And then, of course, to your point, I want to know where they are in their journey and their history, what efforts they've made, what are their plans moving forward, how have they communicated to internal audiences, how have they engaged with internal audiences, and have they, and then there's, of course, let's recognize there's always an issues management, public relations component of this. Have they had complaints? Do they have an active situation? And what advice have they already sought on that? Seth, I don't know if it's just me, but I do not hear you.
Don't hear me.
I do now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, what I was going to say that you recently said in an interview that communicators like yourself should provide, quote, available resources and strategic guidance to create meaningful, impactful PR campaigns that uplift queer voices, end quote. What resources are available, and what sort of strategic guidance do you give to companies when they want to do impactful PR campaigns that uplift queer voices?
Yeah, look, there are the first thing I'd counsel is seek educational resources and articles directly from the queer community, rather than consultants, focus groups, etc. This is really, again, a question of engaging with resources, and there are loads. There are, the ones that I point to are GLAAD, the Trevor Project, and GLSEN, and I can certainly connect anyone who looks at those to the right people there. If you need to read up on what, for example, I think there's a lot of confusion around what the different terms for LGBTQ plus, and people seem to be unsure about what they mean, and that's okay. I'm here as a gay male, admittedly a gay white male that's had a lot of privilege and advantage. To tell you that the amazing thing about the queer community is that it's ever expanding its representation, the celebration of its diversity. That's what Pride's all about along the spectrum. So, look, if whether a person or a company uses LGBTQ plus, or variation of that, what matters is the commitment. What matters is the commitment to that inclusion. And if community members need clarification for what each letter means, that's also okay. And honestly, that's where we come in. It's the communicator's responsibility to clarify and educate where possible and appropriate. And the most important part, again, guess what, Seth? I'm going to say it again, is listening, but particularly bearing that in mind with needs and preferences. And if adding S2S, which means to spirit, by the way, is important to one's community, then everyone's confusion doesn't need to be a deterrent. In fact, it can be an agent for change. It's okay not to know what these acronyms mean.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great thought to end this conversation, Alex. We could have gone on for a lot longer if we wanted to here, but I want to thank you for spending a little time with us from Scotland, and thank you for helping us celebrate Pride Month today as our special guest. I'd also like to thank our producer, Nicole Schumann, for her help. And I have a quick reminder that our next PR News live session will also be from Europe, by the way. It'll be next week at June 23rd at a special time, 11 a.m. in the morning. And we're going to welcome the head of global internal communication at Philip Morris International, and that's Bessie Kokalis-Pescio. So looking forward to that. And we have two things on the calendar. We have our Top Women's virtual event, July 28th, and the Social Shakeup in Atlanta, in person, September 22nd and 23rd. Both have information on our website. Again, thank you so much, Alex, for your insight.
Thanks very much.
Spending time with us. And thank you to all of you for watching. Have a great rest of the day.